A long time ago, or not so long ago, this whole world was reset. Millions and millions of humans were taken out. Taken out. Their buildings, they're huge, giant buildings, because the people that were taken out were my size and Guy Anderson size and, giant size and all kinds of sizes, and they were removed. And the children that were left were dispersed across the world. And a lot of the buildings were repurposed towards the end of that reset. Those that didn't comply were put into asylums that had already been built as beautiful buildings, but they were then repurposed as asylums. You've never heard of it, really? You've never heard of it? Where have you been? Why have you not been on the Dani Henderson channel? Sitting and listening to my friend, the great Tartarian expert, Guy Anderson. Welcome back, sir. How are you?
You know what? I'm so much better for your introduction. They are fantastic. It just flows naturally with you, doesn't it? I need a script.
Uh, well, it's all true. Like you, I study and I know, and it's like every single speaker I have on for my beautiful Jessic events, of which you are speaking this year in September. I know their content, and it's stuff I've always had fascination for, may have actual experience of and with, and have memories of. And so it's easy, it means I'm paying attention to you and respecting you and the audience that are watching this, which is so important. And as we know, you've got 2 seconds to grab the audience or they're off.
Yes.
They go on the board. They don't want to know what your name is. They want to know, what are you going to hit me in the face with today, Danny Henderson? Well, I'm going to start with Guy Anderson. That's what I'm going to do. So I was telling you, I took your book, Tesla and the Cabbage Patch Kids. Goodness me, what a read. What a beautiful, high quality book as well, like beautiful velvety, great paper, great, just good quality all over. And there's like, I don't know how many turned down pages here that we couldn't possibly get through. It is absolutely incredible. It's in two parts as well, Tesla and then the Cabbage Patch Kids and other areas. I think what I want to know from you is, what is in this book, because you've written, obviously there's two more behind you there that you've already covered too, although this is actually one of them, but there's one behind your head that you can't see. There we go. There's two book covers. And so what for you doing this book, what was the most intriguing aspect of the whole Tartarian human reset existence that has been covered up from us, hidden from us?
Hmm. That's a difficult question to answer. When I first started looking into Tartaria, it was the fact that they had been able to remove a huge period of time from our history. And the lengths that they'd gone to do that. And you imagine the work that that involved, and that's why they needed the Jesuits and the Freemasons to join in, because they could get to every literally town, city in the world and remove the information, pay for the information, remove people that had the information, get governments involved. So even in Russia, not that long ago, they had Red Terror, where people were actually going into homes and arresting people. So initially for me, it was, how on earth did they orchestrate this? How do you remove all of that information and make sure there is nothing out there remaining that refers to Tartaria? And it was that was the thing that fascinated me the most. But then when I started to dig, it was the lives that were lost in the process. It's the number of people that we lost. It's into the billions between 1776 and 1876. 3.35 billion people disappeared. And that, I mean, you look at any war that's ever taken place, it pales into insignificance. The people behind this, we need to call out their names. And their descendants today are still running the show. We need to make people aware that if you think that, yeah, what they're doing with fuel prices is bad, what they did in 2020 is bad, that's a drop in the ocean compared to what they are capable of. If they thought they could get away with it today, they would wipe us out tomorrow.
I mean, that's seemingly what we're looking at. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to wipe out as many of us as they possibly can in various devious, evil ways.
Yes, but this time it seems more of a slow burn, doesn't it? Giving us medical interventions that slowly produce other problems or cause other issues or weaken our immune system and so on, or increase the cost of living to an extent where we can no longer eat properly, or we have our movement restricted and poisoning the sky and so on. But to actually kill, 3.35 billion people is, you know, but very cleverly, it wasn't just pandemics and famines. It was civil war. It was getting them to fight
Mhm.
themselves.
Yeah.
That was so clever, cruel, but very, very clever. And I don't think anything's changed. I think most wars, if you actually ask the people on the ground why they were fighting, they would give you a very different answer to what the actual fundamental causes for that conflict, and it will bear no resemblance, I think, to what they've been told. I mean, there are American generals out there right now telling their troops that Trump is doing God's work and he is part of the prophecy.
And that right there is so disturbing because there are other religions on the planet. So are their gods all wrong? And I go, yeah, because my God is the leader. No, mate, no, it's a trap. It's all a trap. Of course, there's something beautiful that everyone has a different name for. We've just got a different name for it. But that's too much to go into because I'm just so bored of the Anunnaki, the Enlils, the gods, that lot, those bamparts. They have done so much interruption. They've been getting in the way of disclosure. I didn't realize for the last 4 years, but I get it now. I get the game. I get the game more than I ever did. I understand it, who the players are, and those that have no idea they've been taken over. They're being used. They have attachments. They have this, as we all are in danger of attachments, spiritual attachments. Friends coming in, people coming to work for us. The little I had it done to me. Oh, I'm so fat and overweight and ill, and I've got no life, and I just like to do stuff, and I can take care of this. And I'm like, all right, then I pay a few hundred quid a month. And then you can come and you can do this because you're such a nice person. That person has come in and just poured acid on my whole organization and literally ruined the architecture, is criminal, illegal, is doing things she shouldn't be doing, Tina. And it's just going on and on and on. But I remember talking to this person once and them telling me that they would do anything and everything for disclosure, meaning whoever gets in her way, because she's hooked up with her boss. Um, and it's very dangerous. It's got very dark and very violent, very criminal, and very scary because it's the old hand again. It's the dark, it's the old hand. And so I've just completely moved away from it. It's nothing to do with me at all. But these people are there, and you cannot tell
Mm.
them. Everything I'm saying to you, they're saying the same thing to you. This is the horror of it, where we've got to be the ones that go, okay, what do I think about this? What do I feel about this? That's why the trick is, oh, choose a side. Well, then you might as well kiss your ass goodbye. Choosing a side is a fool's game. Do not choose a side. You got to choose you. This is a war for your soul. This is a war for your everything, your connection, your love. And you cannot be distracted because you've got dark on both sides. You've got light on both sides. But ultimately, there's a group that mean to take over again and mean to wipe the earth of more than 3.5 billion. The other thing, though, as well about that figure, okay, how did they make note of 8 billion people? They haven't. It's a guesstimate. It's an estimate. It could be way less. It could be way more. China inflates their numbers. They're not 3 billion or whatever. That's to protect themselves. They're in the space race. They're in the space market now. They're trying to launch their own space programs. But the fact is, we're already in space, and that moon landing or that moon flying. Let's go fly around the moon. It's made of cheese. Oh my God, it's so embarrassing, isn't it? It is so embarrassing. But anyway, that's just kind of a snapshot over what's happening in terms of the emotions and the mechanics in this time, 2026, of full disclosure. Thank goodness for people like you who have the courage, because some old bird that was trying to convince me that Tartaria is a myth. It's made up, it's not true. Excuse me, have you been to St. Petersburg? Clearly not. So, so let's talk about some of your favorite places in the world that are absolutely 1000 million percent Tartarian. And what is Tartaria for those who might not know?
I think right now, if anybody looks at Kazakhstan, they're going to see remnants of Atlantis there, but they're going to see more than anything Tartaria, what it was. And until 2012, they were still providing the citizens, for want of a better word, with free energy. You didn't pay for electricity there. They're pulling it from the ether. Now, people will say, well, actually, that was the oil. People weren't paying for oil. No, I'm talking about electricity, not oil. They didn't pay for it. Um, and it is everywhere. They've got the buildings are pristine. They are gold capped buildings and monuments that are still clearly pulling energy from the ether. So the city I would get people to look at, which has been bastardized and inverted, is Astana, which unfortunately is an anagram of Satan. They have a pyramid there. They've got the two Masonic pillars, Jarkin and Boat. Everything is there, and it is sacred geometry. The buildings actually follow the golden ratio. They align. It's very geometric. So they have built on ley lines. It's known to have a lot of ley lines, a lot of energy there. Oddly enough, when it broke away from the former Soviet Union, it became one of the top four nuclear powers in the world. Its nuclear arsenal. This is Kazakhstan. That's been portrayed as being a backwater. Borat. I can't remember the Sasha Cohen. I can't remember
Sacha
his
Baron Cohen,
Baron Cohen.
yeah.
He portrayed it as being backward, and it's anything but. So if people want to see what Tartaria looked like, then that would be the place to start with Kazakhstan and maybe Astana in particular. But yeah, I get hit with that every day. Tartaria didn't exist. It's a psyop. It's a rabbit hole to distract you. But I've spent years buying old encyclopedias, traveling and searching online as well to find old encyclopedias and atlases that give you population figures for it. People that have been there, including Ian Fleming's brother, who wrote the James Bond books, Peter Fleming, who went there and wrote about his travels. Marco Polo wrote about it. Lots of cartographers from sort of the 1500s onwards were writing about what they found when they were there. Palaces, domed buildings, and a complete contrast to what we've been told that they were nomads that became the Mongols that lived in tents. They couldn't be any further from the truth. It's just another example of inversion. But wherever anybody is that's watching this, they will have Tartarian structures in their town, in their nearest town or city. They will be everywhere.
You know, the Kazakhstan or Kazakhstan, there's different ways of pronouncing it. The hidden beauty of it, the star forts, the glory, the wealth that exists there. When again, yeah, we're like, is that near Turkmenistan? You know, is that there's so many distractions, so many similar sounds, but I suspect and have suspected for a long time that that city is one that the repugnant evil deletes will keep for themselves. That's where they will be living and enjoying and going, other than areas of Antarctica and other untouched, glorious, hidden lands, because the maps across the world are not completely mapped for everyone. They are absolutely hidden. And like you say, finding the old books and the old maps is definitely still a clue. Well, remember back in the day, the bonfire of the vanities, burning the books, burning artwork, the
Yes.
Germans in World War II, I'm sure one also they're trying to kill history so we can't prove its existence. And then
Mm.
tell everyone that's left behind, you're mad, you're crazy, that didn't happen, you imagined it. To dumb them down, dumb their water with fluoride, poison their skies and water. Wow, it sounds like 2026, doesn't it?
It
Yeah,
certainly
I know.
does.
It's so tragic, isn't it? They actually think they're going to pull off another reset. But, this time we found out about it. And those that tried to fight back before, that were put into the orphanages or their buildings repurposed as mental asylums, they don't get to win this time. And they know that. And I know they know that. And they know I know they know that.
But that's got to be one of the good things about social media and the internet, the speed in which we can communicate and share information. And even if they take, as I've had done many times, they take a post down, But by the time they've done that, it's been shared, maybe 1,000 times, and then people then share it on and on and on it goes. So I think that that's with all of the negative aspects to the internet and to some degree social media where it's not social at all, is it? It's actually the opposite of that. It's stopping us socializing because we can say, well, I spoke to them yesterday via Messenger. I don't now need to go around for a cup of coffee. So it's kind of the opposite. Um, but as a good, I suppose, as one of the good aspects to it, we do have the ability to share that information. And that's their stumbling block, isn't it? That it doesn't matter what they throw at us. We're telling the rest of the world through not just social media, but also, YouTube and other platforms. We're saying this is what they're doing now. We're calling them out and we're putting names as well out there. And I think that you're right. They're not going to achieve what they're setting out to. I know that Iran is very much focused on hiking the cost of living up ultimately and fuel to restrict our ability to move, whether it's flying or traveling by car. And obviously then transportation costs with produce and so on will go up. You can see what it's all for, but we're seeing through that too. Um, so I think that we're going to see them throw a few more um, curved balls our way, but
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to work. I'm confident, as you are, that it's too late. It's over. I think they're going to panic now.
They are in panic. I heard yesterday that Switzerland has said, get stuffed, we're not letting you take our cash from us. And that was a massive, massive bomb. And they're freaking out because there was this awful, hideous people from Davos, the World Economic Forum, who think they run the world, but it's the hidden hand behind them that run it, obviously. We've got some names, Bill Gates, Klaus Schwab. Who's that German bird with the short hair? She was in charge of the cash, and she was saying that if they will only be able to have 1,000 pounds if they go into a grey area, they will be in prison. Oh my God, where are we? The Bavarian castle in the in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. It makes it so farcical. It's like I really am inside a video game, and these are some of the Muppets. These are some of the characters that need eliminating permanently from making decisions for my life and my brothers and my sisters' lives. And that's literally where we're at. There are those that can handle it. There are those that think it's all complete nonsense, and that's fine too. I was with my uncle today and I was telling him a bit about my time in Amsterdam when I was in court watching the 9 lawyers that Bill Gates
Yes.
had to hire because people are now suing Bill Gates, Mark Stutzer, whatever his name is, the Netherlands former prime minister, Albert Bourla, CFO, CEO from Pfizer, because people got damaged and they've got proof now scientifically that they've done damage. So this is the first. So it's world news. We made history. So I'm sitting there, so I'm chatting to my uncle, telling him about being in the front row, reporting live on this story. And then I said some of the windbags at the front, Klaus Schwab, Bill Gates, and I went, Soros. He went, Soros? And I went, yeah. And I said, oh, he's been accused of all kinds of things, running caravans, trafficking children. He went, wait, 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 wait. He goes, wait. He goes, I always think that people are, anti-Semitic, at him. I'm like, seriously? He goes, well, I know you're not. I said, well, therefore, I'm not, therefore. But then I just left it. I just left it hanging. I don't need to convince him or anyone. And I gave up doing that a long time ago. Don't waste our time trying to convince people when we know what we know. And even if we're told at some point, actually, that's a bit wrong, that's okay. I'll be wrong. I'll say I'm sorry. But there's no going back now. And that's the difference. Humanity is up and on its feet and pushing forward and saying, you are not going to own us. Oh my God, you mentioned earlier the descendants, the bloodline families that have been trying to take over, putting in the full story, the false narrative, Genghis Khan and the Wall of China, and it's all inverted, as you said. Can you name some of the descendants that have been destroying our planet for hundreds of years?
Absolutely. We're told that there are 13 bloodline families that we know of, but there are 13 hidden bloodline families that we don't know of or that we don't talk about. They don't hit the radar. That's the psyop. The 13 bloodline families are exactly what they are. and at the helm it is the Rothschilds. If you look at who bailed out Trump, you know, when each time he's gone bankrupt, the first person to tweet when he went into Venezuela with any kind of impact was Nathaniel Rothschild, congratulating him. I think that they still very much are pulling all of the strings. And of course, they've then got their offshoots, their cousins, and where they splintered off that bloodline into the Rockefellers and DuPonts and Kennedys and so on. But it is very much the Rothschilds. And I agree with Billy Carson. Billy says that Armin Ra, and I've researched this as well, but nowhere near to the extent he has. Armin Ra left everything behind, the most powerful ruler of the earth, um, who was also Marduk. He left everything to the children of Ra, the Ra childs. And they've changed their name over the years. There've been Bauer and lots of other variations, but it's still them running the show. The Rothschilds control the money. The Rockefellers might control petroleum indirectly and pharmaceuticals, but ultimately sat at the very top, it is them. And then they've put their cousin, or the Orsini bloodline into the
Yeah.
Vatican. Pepe Orsini still running it now. It is the Rothschilds, and I think that that's where we need to look at first. Their financial empire is where we need to chip away at, and start to boycott anything that they're associated with, whether it's Blackstone, BlackRock, just to boycott.
Vanguard.
Vanguard. At the bottom of every rabbit hole, there is a van guarding a BlackRock.
Yeah, the black stone, the black cube, the Saturnian. Yeah, yeah. It's so again embarrassing when you look at the video game as a video game, and you look at all the different layers and all the hidden things and all the rewards you get when you grab this, you grab that, undo this door, you reveal another legend that was going to be hidden forever. When you mention the 13 bloodlines that we do know, and you mention the others that we don't know, we're looking at the Orsinis, the Medicis, the
Yes.
Farneses, the whole kind of European royalty, the hidden hand. It's interesting, when I lived in America for so many years, they call the Medicis the Medicis, the Medicis. It's the Medicis! Anyway, and then and then they'll go in the Renaissance, the Renaissance. I said Renaissance, but it's like aluminium and aluminum. It's so funny, but the words are so similar. But we can really miss out on that too. I've noticed that over the many years that I've now been alive, how we can hear a word and it's just completely misconstrued, but it is the same word. That's all part of also dividing us as well. So we have to be very mindful of
Absolutely.
that. Yeah. So yeah, the Rothschilds get the blame for a lot of things, but of course they're right up there, right against the Rockefellers too. And these are going way, way, way back. There are historical statues in the names of these people from pre-Egyptian, Babylonian, Sumerian, and other times that I think we're still going to discover. I've mentioned a few times now, and I'm getting bored saying it, but I don't trust anything I've heard about the Anunnakis just from one source because I see the deception and dishonesty from that source still continuing to this moment. So now I'm very concerned about what I say about them. So I'd rather dismiss them myself
Yeah.
so that I'm not lying because I'm not a liar. And I've got serious concerns about that group and the Tina women I mentioned earlier who will stop. So the bloodline families that we talk about, they are so much more extended. You mentioned cousins and other relatives, and they hide. And of course, like when the Jews escaped Germany, the German Holocaust, that did happen. That they changed their names, of course, to try and protect themselves, but keep a link to their original root name. There are so many other people that have done the same thing too. And let's take, for example, John Todd, who was originally John Collins from the Collins family, came over, infiltrated the militaries, witches and warlocks, singing over music, reversing music, inputting sounds in the music to indoctrinate Satanism into every child's bedroom. And it's still happening today. And it's sad to me how many people are only just realizing how much they've been used and abused. But like you said, and like I believe, we win. This time we win. But we got to keep putting the information out. What else? What other family names do you think we should remember in particular here at this time?
Well, I think it's very clever what they've done because they have hidden a lot of their bloodline by changing their names entirely. And this is, and I put this on my website actually because I daren't put it on social media. I'd been looking into Tony Blair, and I don't know if you remember when he came into power, a lot of posters, smear campaign posters started to appear of him with the devil's eyes, demonic looking. I mean, he does look demonic anyway, but looking back at it now, it makes a lot more sense. So I started doing some digging into him, and there is an MI5 document that someone shared with me, a section of it, and I can't remember exactly what it said, but it's out there. You can get it, from the MI5 website. There is a document that's been declassified that actually refers to Tony Blair being something more than he is. That he isn't just the prime minister at the time. He isn't just the prime minister. That he has far more power than people are aware of, and it was suggesting that to some extent he wasn't actually human. And in his autobiography, he makes similar kind of comments to support that theory. So I did a bit of digging, and I had I had information shared with me that his surname isn't Blair at all. That his bloodline, if it's traced back correctly, is not Blair. Even his date of birth is incorrect. That he actually is a Rothschild. But more than that, his blood group and DNA are not recognized as being human. And that's the difference. I think that is why these parasitic people, these bloodline families, treat us in a different way to how they would treat each other, because they perceive us as being lesser than them, that they are more reptilian, and that they are cold-blooded, lack empathy. I don't even know if they know what love really means, and to be passionate about something. And I think that isn't because that the way that they're brought up or the schools that they're sent off to study Latin and buggery. I think that actually it's their genetic makeup. Um, Also, Adolf Hitler. He was a Rothschild. His mother had been working as a maid, and lo and behold, she gets pregnant, and then Hitler's father, and I can't for the life of me remember his name right now. He'd actually changed his name to Hitler. He then adopted Adolf as his own when he married Adolf's mother, another Rothschild. And then I started looking into the royal family, and following the Napoleonic Wars, where England was in financial trouble and couldn't finance to continue the conflict. They'd literally run out of money. They couldn't pay the troops anymore. Um, it was the Rothschilds that came and bailed them out, but it wasn't the repayment terms that was their issue, that was the main focus. They wanted to cede the heir of the throne of the British Empire at the time from that moment on. And it is alleged that Queen Victoria was the first Rothschild to sit on the throne, and ever since then, that's why there's so many resemblances that are pointed out online to William or Charles and so on, to the Rothschilds. So there are a lot of families out there, a lot of people out there that we don't recognize as being a bloodline family, but are, because they've changed the name, because we can't have that name popping up every time you're talking about a world leader or a Hollywood star, and they're all related. Hanks is related to them, Tom Hanks, Madonna, Brad Pitt, they're all related. Anybody that rises to a point where they can influence to some degree, whether it's through their work as an actor or their music or their presence on a stage, the World Economic Forum stage I'm referring to there, they make sure that it's family. They're all family. They're all working together, and they do keep it in the family. And Nathaniel Rothschild, his first wife died. I think they were married 7 years, and then he married the heir to the Guinness Empire. So you can see what they do. They'll marry in, and they've done this so many times, marry into other families to ultimately take control of what they've got too. So this has been going on forever. So I think now we're past the surname. What surnames are we looking for? Because of what they've done, changed the names, married into other families to hide themselves. So yeah, it's very difficult now to trace everybody involved within those bloodline families because of what they've done. But it's very clever because at the same time as taking the power ultimately and the wealth and control of another family's business or empire, by switching the name, it doesn't hit the radar. You just think, well, you know, they're another business that started off with granddad in his shed, and
Yeah.
then it becomes this multi-million, dollar industry over, over the next few years, and so on. And it's just not the case.
It's just so terrible how many people have been robbed over these years, taken out, physically removed, their
Mm.
patents taken, like darling Tesla, their lives ruined, their land taken, their homes taken, illegally, mostly illegally, by these monstrous peasant-minded horrors that put themselves in the highest realms and are the lowest scummery on the earth, lower than one-celled amoebas. You were doing an article the other day where you were very cleverly reminding again and pointing out how the children who were abandoned somewhat, but I don't want to tell the story. This is your story, your thesis for this week, let's say, because you're always writing books, articles, Substacks, everything for your website. So take us through that work this week, please, with the surnames and how the children got them.
Yeah, so there is this common misconception that your surname is based upon what your ancestors did for a living. Baker, Miller. I mean, my real surname, my nan, she got married twice, so I had two step granddads. Um, but my original surname, my dad's real father was called Hooper, and they make the rings for barrels. So, a barrel of ale or whatever, those copper rings around them, brass rings, sorry, beg your pardon, they were made by Hooper. And so, therefore, I'm led to believe that if I follow the narrative, that my ancestors got their surname because they made those hoops. But actually, I've done a lot more digging than that because it doesn't ring true. I've followed certain family trees. I've looked at America, perhaps more than anywhere, where they've just given people surnames. And in some cases, they've given them the surname of the Christian name of the person that found them. And that's why we'll see somebody that has a surname that actually can also be used as a first name. So it might be James or John or whatever. There are a lot of people that have that, or Charles or George. There are a lot of surnames out there that actually make Christian names too. So after some digging, I uncovered, and it's taken me a long time, and I'm still doing it now. But it appears that actually your surname, in many cases, not all, but in many cases, it's given to you based upon where you were found. So if you go back to the late 1800s into the early 1900s, where you were found as an orphan could be church, ward, street, chapel, mill, um, a blacksmith's lodge, a field. They've given people a surname based upon that. So Oldfield, street, lane, bank, banks. There are a lot of Miller, for example, someone that was found at a mill. So it doesn't necessarily mean that their ancestors were millers, but that's what they've done. There are a lot of surnames that actually refer to where the person was found, where their great, 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 great grandparent was found. And that was really what they did with the orphans that survived the reset. Because overnight, as I was saying earlier on, the death toll was you know significant. We were left with a lot of orphans. 500,000 was shipped to America. A quarter of a million ended up on the orphan trains going to the Midwest. And they were all given names based upon where they were found. They were never adopted. There was never any paperwork involved. They thought they were going to be adopted when they got the other end, but they weren't. So they just gave them a surname, but based upon where they were found, or ultimately the surname was the Christian name of the person that bought them or used them. And in some cases there's a profession in there as well. But if you think about how many children were sent to the mines and how many children worked down the mines, there aren't many people out there that surname is minor.
Mm.
So it does tend to lean towards the location of where they were found.
Mm. The topics that we're raising, well, we kind of move swiftly around them, not to focus too much in one spot, because I understand, and you know full well how overwhelming this information is to those who've never heard it before. It really
Yes.
is the absolute worst of the worst, because not only were so many children taken from their parents who'd been bumped off in various different ways, not just by black plagues, not just by fires in every major city, but other ways too. These children were promised they would be reunited, and they never were. And the people that were in charge of shipping them off across the world to make sure they could never be a mum or a dad finding their child again, they did it. They were cruel. It was done on purpose. There was so much that was just unthinkably cruel and deliberate to create as much harm and suffering, to totally traumatize the child, that they also would have ability to never remember where they came from. That will be beaten out of them, like the children in the residential homes, our beautiful indigenous Indians in America and Canada in particular, who were taken from their parents. The parents were threatened to put in prison if they didn't let the kids go. They were going to give the kids education. They cut their hair. Biggest insult to these native people. The hair is the antenna. They beat them. They raped them. They killed them. They did everything they could to beat their culture out of them, killing a child in front of the other kids to let them know you're next if you don't do as we tell you. Never let them use their native tongue, never let them have their original beautiful names, Chief Standing Eagle, Spotted Bear, the Black Horse, whatever the names that were given. But I'm so happy to this day to report that the indigenous cultures still exist. They remembered their languages, their oral languages, regardless of how many were brutally murdered and maimed. There are so many sad stories that we repeat in history that we're aware of, but ultimately it brings me joy that the darkness is always lost. It's always tried. It's always lost. And just like the evil end of Atlantis, which is, I see that as this time, the fall of Atlantis. Atlantis had to be taken down because it was so corrupt at the end. And I feel like we're in the time, the rise of Lemuria. And I feel there's a beautiful balance that's coming back on this planet. I mean, name it whatever you want. You mentioned Marduk earlier, that boy, that not reptilian, what was he? Well, we don't know actually. I mean, apparently, Enlil was half reptilian and half human. Apparently, Ea is more human, but then some woman told me that he's got grey DNA in him, grey ET DNA in him. And she did tell me that, and I never focused on it because I was terrified what people would say, because nobody likes the grey aliens, of course. So you better figure that one out, love. And because we got to have the truth, and we got to be clean and clear in the truth, and the people of this planet deserve to hear it and not have fantasy stories and I was married to this person and how many princesses and different Anunnaki geneticists there are, and who cares? What are you doing now? That's what we want to know. Who are you now in this body? How are you going to help your brothers and your sisters, and we should all be in this together, and many of us are. There'll be people watching this thinking, what the hell is she talking about? That's okay too. We're talking on many different levels because we're a multi-dimensional species, and there are so many levels that we can address and we can speak to, and that's what we are doing. And your books cover every area that I believe I've ever read about, thought about, known about, been about. And there's just so many ways to go. I did want to mention the technology. You briefly touched on the ether technology in Kazakhstan. On page 80 of your book, there's some information on the Baghdad battery, a very primitive, they say primitive, but it was quite genius, way to create light, to create power. Can you tell us anything else about the The battery was called the Baghdad battery or the Parthian battery, and any other kind of useful, because people living off grid, they're now using this technology to power up their own grids.
Yes, and the other thing that you can do, I'm just going to go off at a tangent slightly for a second,
Good.
but you can pull energy from the ground. So we live on ley lines. We are essentially walking around a circuit board, and by putting the right structures at the right points, like acupuncture needles, you can actually electrify an area. But there are people out there that work with electroculture. You put plates into the ground, and I can't remember the exact distance between them and the size of the plates involved. But if you put a copper plate and a zinc plate facing each other into the ground and attach cables to them, you will generate voltage. It's only a small amount, we're just talking about 1 volt or so, but the bigger the plate, the more voltage. And you can run them in parallel. So you can increase the voltage. And there are people out there doing it now. You can go onto YouTube and actually watch people doing this. And I don't know if you remember at school, but we had a physics class where we put electrodes into a potato and it pulled voltage, a very small current of voltage. And it's proving that everything is alive, everything is electrical, and it is energy. So we don't need to burn fossil fuels or have nuclear power stations, which incidentally are all built where ley lines meet. Where ley lines cross is exactly where you'll find every nuclear power station. And that throws a spanner in the works because I don't think they're nuclear at all. So we are literally on an electric circuit board. And the idea with the Baghdad battery is very similar to that. And it's a kind of, I suppose, a portable version of what the Atlanteans had and what Tartarian structures had, where you've got this kind of tank, if you like. I mean, it's like a vase almost that's filled with, originally it was filled with red mercury with a copper rod in it, and that would store a charge, and you could run them in sync. But the real question is, well, first of all, these are still being found. They're old. You know, people are finding these. They're a couple of thousand years old. People are still finding them now. And the kind of narrative, first of all, was that they didn't exist, that they were something else entirely, and finally they accepted the fact that these were small batteries, if you like. Then they couldn't work out what they were for, because if we look at electricity, there wasn't anything that required electricity, according to the narrative, at that period of time. You know, electricity didn't exist. So how did they have this technology and what were they using it for? So they've decided it was for plating. If you wanted to gold plate something, that they were actually using those batteries to do that. Okay, well, I'll accept that as an argument for why they exist, but it still doesn't avoid the subject that 2,000 years ago, someone was making Baghdad batteries that produced electricity before we're told they knew what electricity was. Explain that one if you can, because they can't. So it doesn't matter whether this was used for plating or whatever it was, that's a side issue. They understood electricity and could produce something that generated voltage 2,000 years ago. It throws everything out of the window. So all you've got to do is magnify the size of a Baghdad battery and put it on the roof of your building, and it will pull it. I mean, you know, we know the power of a compass. It doesn't matter what you do, how you move that compass, unless you're in the Bermuda Triangle, doesn't matter what you do with that, it will always point north. Well, that requires energy to do that. That is our geomagnetic energy line pulling that in one direction. If you can harness that, so you imagine if you made a giant compass on your garden lawn and you didn't put a glass plate over the top of it so you could actually touch the needle. You imagine if you went out there and let's say this thing is 20 feet long, this needle, perfectly balanced and magnetized facing north. You walk up to it and you slowly push it all the way round 180 degrees so it faces south. and then let go. Make sure your legs aren't in the way because it will take them off.
Wow.
That energy that's required to pull that needle back 180 degrees in the blink of an eye, if you can harness that, then you've got free power. So that's just one example, but of course they were also getting it from the weather. They were getting it from static, and they were also harnessing lightning. So during a lightning storm, we're told that these are lightning conductors on the top of all of these old buildings. And you think, well, hold on a minute. How many buildings were actually hit by lightning? You know, how many people do you know that have had their building destroyed or a building in their town destroyed in their lifetime by lightning? These were actually attracting lightning to store it within those buildings. So it's been around a long time. And the Baghdad battery is just a very, very small version of what Tartarian buildings were using.
Mm. Yeah, there's so much technology now that we took for granted or that we may have messed around with in school in a chemistry or a
Mm.
physics lab or doing something with a Bunsen burner.
I remember those.
Yeah, only to realize now that, the periodic table also with all the different elements has been horrifically
Mm.
interfered with. They have removed so many of the elements. One can call the ether one,
Yes.
per your example. And trusting that the leaders of the past rewrote history to suit them, are still doing it in order to cull as many humans as possible, keep us dumbed down. You look at a Tartarian building compared to a modern, like if when I go to London, I'm like, oh my God, I don't even bother looking up. There are so many hideous, awful buildings in amongst the beautiful, beauteous, rich, architecture everywhere. And there's, that I love the fish, the lampposts along the River Thames, the
Yes.
ancient kind of Victorian and 1920s kind of Art Deco with the black fish around, and there's lots of Egyptian nods there and an obelisk here and there and all the different symbology. That's around Westminster as well, Westminster Parliament, etc. But everything is right in front of us. Everything that the dark ones are doing is to mock us, to disintegrate us. I'm convinced that like Lord Bollock Chops over there said to Lord Farty Face over here, my building's going to be better than yours. And they're going to steal funds from all people's pensions and their heating and all the rest of it and throw up a monstrosity that looks a bit phallic, bit like a penis because they haven't
Mm.
got one. And then Lord Farty Face over here's, right, that's not fair. I'm going to build an even bigger one. I'm convinced that's what they're doing. Schlangers out. I know that's a bit crude, but slanging about with their money at the top. I know it's true because years ago, there was a little company. I was a recruiter. I was a bit more than that, but I was a recruiter. And I was recruiting for a company in London who'd got the first electric cars and the first little mopeds ever. Excuse me. These two guys worked so hard. And long story short, all they needed was 25 grand. And I remember I was so desperate listening to this phone call, and I had 12 in my bank at that time. And I'm like, I'm going to give it to them. I'm going to give it to them because I couldn't bear. These grown men are crying. My friend Terry, who's now dead, was the mediator, big businessman. He was a big guy in business. And he was on the phone with Lord Bollock Chops and Lord So and so. I do remember their names. I'm not going to say them. I don't want to be killed. And um, the lords were on the, remember those old-fashioned phones we had, old-fashioned to us now. You pick up the phone, you've got there's four or five different people on the same line, like the modern day Zoom, but on a wire phone. And he kept putting the guys in the company in London who were crying and asking for money because they were going to lose their houses. And Lord so and so and Lord so and so, they were arguing with each other. They weren't paying attention to these men who were on their knees. And there was a woman, Trudy, in the office as well. I remember looking at her and she just couldn't look at me. And I'm like, oh my God, this is awful. This is how the rich do it. And at the end, both of the lords, they got bored with each other and one hung up and the other went, oh, fuck this, I'm leaving and left. And these poor men, their company went down that week. And it was all pride and poppycocking and, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's all it is. It's a big game because they don't care about the consequences of the people that they're involved with. And it's almost like I see this with war. and with some of the larger businesses, that they're playing chess almost. That it doesn't matter. It's no longer about money. For some, it's fun, and for some, it's about destroying something else. And there's a lot of pleasure to be had from that by the looks of it. That kind of seems to be part of this whole loosh farm theory. But they don't care. And I purposefully don't acknowledge or address anybody if I'm talking about them as Lord this, King that, or Sir
Mm.
something. I don't recognize it. So if I was to meet Charles, I wouldn't address him as Your Royal Highness. And if I was to meet a Lord or a Knight of the Realm, I would not use that term. So Keir Starmer to me would be Keir. I would address. There's probably a number of things I'd like to address him as, but I would never use Sir because it's a fake title given
Yeah.
to him by someone who had no right to be on the throne at the time anyway. So it's fictitious. I don't recognize it, but they think that it makes them better than everybody else, this
Mm.
glorious title. But actually, it doesn't if you look into what it ultimately means. Sir is just servant of the realm. I am now a bitch to the royal family. A serve.
Oh, that's funny. Well, you know what I told you on my platform yesterday. I did a kind of a monologue on what my thinking on Charles. For not addressing the public in Great Britain because this is a largely Christian Roman Catholic country. It's definitely not a Muslim country, even though the radical Muslims are trying to take over, but it's not theirs to take over. Iran's revolting. The Muslims did that to Iran. The Muslims did that to Egypt and enforced and took over, making that the number one religion. But obviously, we're not allowing that here, despite Keir Starmer and Macron, the French Prime Minister, coming together in a plan and sending rubber boats over the water to
Mm,
Britain to populate the hotels with radical soldiers ready for civil war. Now it's all
absolutely.
starting to blow up anyway between all the boys, our boys and those boys. And but my point is that he's so weak and didn't have the backbone to address the people because he's kissing ass of the Muslims because he's tricking them because he wants to create civil war. But his ultimate god is Satan, and people aren't getting that bit yet. But I did a meme, and I know it's triggering guys out there. It's absolutely true what we're saying. You're just going to get it in small doses, as much as you can handle, and there's plenty of proof. I heard you out there, Doris. There's plenty of proof. I made a meme and it's like, it's Jesus coming through the clouds and pointing down at Charles saying, "Sit down, banana brain." So that's my name for him right now. But they are ridiculous. I mean, it is a circle, it's Punch and Judy. It's just absolutely farcical. And they totally underestimated the beautiful power of the human spirit, the human soul, the human heart, our love for each other, our love for our children, our love for our animals, our love for a beautiful world. And because they're incapable of creating any one thing, this is what's happening. The uprising is happening with us. Now, if we take a look at your book, Conspiracy Theories Behind You, this is your latest book, and it's absolutely
Yes.
fantastic. And let's just go over a couple of things. Number one, let's address because people are seeing that word Agartha. A lot of people do
Mm.
not know what Agartha is. Can you tell us, please, a little bit about Agartha?
Yeah, yeah. Well, this is first of all, I think it's important to understand what we are stood on right now. Is it a spinning ball? Or are we on some kind of flat plane or something entirely different? Well, we've been brought up to understand that we are spinning on a ball at 1,000 miles an hour out in space, and we just happen to be where we are. The moon just happens to sit where it is, and we have to accept that that is how things are without question. Then we've got the flat Earth. And people are obviously ridiculed for thinking it's a flat Earth, and flat earthers ridicule those that think it's spherical. So what are we actually stood on? And for me personally, I think that we are perhaps on a landmass that's a lot larger than we've been led to believe, and that's why they've introduced certain flight paths and shipping routes to stop us seeing areas that we're not supposed to, that throw a spanner in the works. I think essentially what we are on is like a lump of Swiss cheese, that there are lots of holes, lots of entrances. Now, apparently, and this came from a friend of mine, Elizabeth Hancock, that in I think it was around the 1500s, that in Germany in particular, they actually said that the people were no longer able or allowed to trade with the civilization from the inner earth. They were no longer allowed to conduct business with them, and these entrances were sealed off. Well, the main one, and perhaps if anybody studied inner earth, the biggest one would be Agartha. And that's a completely different breakaway, almost, if you like, civilization to us, kind of almost like Atlantis in a way. And that is what is underneath us right now. And in my mind, I wonder if we are on something that's actually completely flat, and we live here on above, but below there is an almost inversion, another world that's kind of an echo of Atlantis, if you like, and that is Agartha. And we know that Admiral Byrd hit something when he was, flying around the poles and on his missions. That if we follow his diaries, that he went into an actual hole, some sort of gigantic. I don't know what the word is, not a portal as such, it was an entrance, and that he went in and then his plane could no longer control it himself. It was actually taken over and he landed, and he was greeted by these sort of glowing figures, almost luminescent, that were a much higher frequency and vibration, that spoke to him and told him that he was to leave, and they immediately went from a mission that was supposed to be there for months. They immediately packed up and left. So there's something going on underneath us. And we've got stories of Shambhala as well. There are also stories of other areas. You mentioned Lemuria, but there's also Hyperborea. Now,
Hmm.
that may well be underneath us too. So we're talking about civilizations that are under the earth, underneath us. And there are lots of stories in cultures throughout the world, perhaps more so with Native Americans, that there are races of giants that live underground, and these have been written about by a helicopter pilot who actually went to live on the Solomon Islands. I can't remember his name, but he actually wrote a book about a race of giants. They're always red-haired, always red-headed. These giants that actually live underground and would occasionally come to the surface, take someone from the tribe to mate with. And in one case, a girl actually returned after a few years pregnant. She'd gone missing. They thought that they'd taken her and that was it. They wouldn't see her again. But she came back pregnant, and she gave birth to this kind of, well, I don't know how to describe it, but it wasn't like you and us, a combination of a sort of giant with red hair and double rows of teeth, and obviously incredibly large for its age. She gave birth prematurely, and when it got to about 5 years old, they killed it. And one of the elders of this tribe said that the reason that they killed this child was because they didn't want history repeating itself. And they didn't want any interaction with some of these beings that lived in the inner earth.
Hmm.
So there are lots of stories throughout different cultures that kind of mirror that, that there are beings that live beneath us. And Agartha is kind of proposed to be a civilization that is very advanced, almost like the Atlanteans found somewhere else. That not all of them fled to the Basque region of Spain, or Ireland and Scotland, but some of them actually, and Tenerife, of course, um, that some of them actually went underground. And what's really strange is I had past life regression, a session about a year ago, it must have been, and I was kind of skeptical. I didn't know whether or not I was going to see what I wanted to see, or that this was real. And I was very much on the fence with the whole thing, but I would never dismiss anything at all. I'd never ridicule someone for their thoughts, or their beliefs or their practices. I just take it on board and then make a decision: is it something for me or not? Anyway, I had it done, and halfway through, she's saying to me, "Where are you now? Where are you now?" And I was a red-headed giant, I reckon 8 feet tall, and I was in what looked like a kind of pasture land, a very sort of rural part of what I believe to be certainly within the northern hemisphere, but my guess is maybe Ukraine, round somewhere like that, because that's where my mother's father's from. So I think I'd gone back there. Um, and I'm a dairy farmer. I'm surrounded by cows. My wife, oddly, looks like Dawn French. And
Gorgeous.
yeah, and I've got these three girls, three daughters, and I've got the wooden log cabin. You'd expect Heidi to come skipping and singing out of. And I'm sat in there, and we're having a meal, and then I go outside, and I'm doing something with the cows, bringing them in or moving them or something before we settle down for the evening. And then all of a sudden, the sky fills with these fireballs that I realized weren't meteorites. They were actually some kind of direct energy weapons. And everything is suddenly on fire. And I turn around and my house is on fire. And I know my wife and my children are in there.
Mm.
And I run towards it, but there's no way I'm going to get in it. I mean, the thing is, burst into flames. And then she said, "What are you going to do now?" And I said, "I'm going for help." And she said, "Where are you going?" And I said, "Well, I'm marching through the fire and the rubble, and I'm marching north." She said, "Why north?" I said, "I'm going to Agartha. I'm going to get help." Now, where did that come from?
Wow, that's so
So,
great.
so there's something about it, and I think that that's why I resonate with Tartaria. But yeah, it was clear as day that I never had this conversation with anybody before. I'd never thought about this before, and there I am. You know, I am under. I can't control anything. I am completely under, and I am marching to Agartha. I'm marching to an entrance so I can go underground and get help. I was going for help, and I kept saying that. And she said, she then asked me who was responsible, and I saw one of the Rothschilds. I think it might have been Solomon Rothschild. I can't remember which one it was, but I saw a Rothschild. And she said, "What are they doing?" And I said, "They're laughing at me." And she said, "See if you can strip away their face, take their skin suit off, their meat suit, remove it. What can you see now?" And I saw a
Mm.
grey, an alien. And I think at that point I was maybe lots of things going on and I saw what I wanted to see. She brought me right up to the current time and she said, "Can you see two problems right now?" And I said, "Yes. I can see Musk and Trump together in the Oval Office, laughing and chatting with the press." And she said, "Strip them away. What do you see?" And I saw two robots. It's weird, isn't it? I've gone off somewhere now, haven't I? But yeah, so Agartha, it's the inner Earth, and what's really strange is I've just bought a map that I found in an antique shop, and it's a map of Great Britain, but it's on its side, so it's not as we would see it, vertical. It's actually horizontal,
Mm.
and it was actually the cartographer drew this in 1535, I believe it was, and the North Sea is called the Hyperborean Ocean.
There you go.
If Hyperborea, Agartha, Tartaria, Lemuria didn't exist, why the bloody hell are cartographers actually writing it? I mean, there's a Tartarian Sea. There's that's
Yeah.
still there. But yes, so this is interesting, and it kind of all it ties it all together. So what we've been told is mythological, whether it's beings, periods of time, or locations. I think is actually to just put us off the scent. So if we mention these things with other people, we're laughed at because we're saying, "What, you think giants are real, do you? You think Atlantis existed, did you?" And I think
Yeah.
that's the idea.
Yeah, definitely. Couple of things there just to briefly glance over. You mentioned the flight paths. I'm so beyond annoyed having to catch the planes. It's like getting on a school bus that flies across the sky because we know the great technology we have. We can get to the moon in 10 minutes. I had JP on my channel last night. telling us about the technology. Of course, I've done that for years on this channel, bringing people who've flown on military craft, TR-3Bs and other, and had them show up at my conferences. I just think it's mentioned the Red Terror there. That was the interrogations in Russia. The
Mm.
flight paths are designed in the most pathetic. Oh, the way they do things, it drives me crazy. I'm getting crosser as I'm getting older, less patient. The flight from America to Russia, for example, it's like that big, but now we have to go all the way around, wasting all the supposed gallons of gas that they take and that they use because we're not told of the correct propulsion systems that we have once the planes are up. And it just goes on. It's never ending. So check out flight paths, guys. Go do some mapping of the world map and see how close other countries are. And then ask yourself, why do we have to take a 24-hour, 22-hour, 13-hour flight when they're right next door to each other? Go take a look at that. You mentioned the flatness of the earth and the Agarthan inner worlds underneath. That will trigger some people to go, oh my God, he's a flat earther. But end of the day, if he is a flat earther, I don't care. He's my mate. As far as I'm concerned, we live on a round planet, right? And but we could both be right, we could both be wrong. At this stage, this is what I'm telling people about choosing a side. There are some people that might go, "Oh my God, guy's a flat earther," and they're gone.
No,
And
I'm
then
not.
I know you're not, but I'm
I
making the
don't know
point.
what it is.
Exactly. But this is where, and then people don't take time to think and study. They follow the leader that they're advised. Some people that follow a guru or a leader, or a galactic queen, they follow that. They don't think, they miss out, they block their own growth. And that queen will turn on them in a second. She doesn't even know their name, half of them. That's what I'm saying. Dangerous art of war is choosing a side. Don't choose a side. Be open to everything. And then it's like David Icke, our friend David Icke, who was on this channel with you and me and all the great speakers at our conference, for our conference in September, Galactic Spiritual Informers, greatest disclosure event on Earth. Details underneath. Anyway, and he can't stand Trump. He loathes Trump, like a lot of people in Britain. And there are those that love him. Now, does it mean because David Icke's information is so crucial, but he hates Trump? Does it mean that people then, because they love Trump, can't listen to David? Of course it doesn't. So stop doing that to yourselves, guys. People are, as you know, people are doing this. They are robbing themselves of all the nuggets and winning all the layers in the simulation, whatever you want to call this world we live on. Stop picking a side. If your bird doesn't like it, don't listen to your bird. If your bloke doesn't like it, don't listen to your bloke. You got to use critical thinking for yourself. For yourself. Because when you are proven right, that person that mocked you at first will go, oh, thank you. Thank you for the information. There are, again, as always, a million, trillion, gazillion ways that you and I could go with your information, with your great books, with your great knowledge on Tartaria in particular. I just want to point out the zombie word on that book there, Conspiracy Theories. When COVID hit, the
Mm.
I don't think it was the CDC's website. I think it was the World Economic Forum who created, planned, and designed for this to be executed globally. There was a page on there that had the words zombie apocalypse. They were laughing at us now because they thought billions more would just drop dead, but we didn't because we're not gonna, and we ain't, and we haven't. And that's it. And that's what I want people to remember. But give us your take on, as we've covered Agartha, let's cover your theory on the zombies too. What is your take on who and what are the zombies?
Yes, that's an interesting one. But first of all, the flat Earth thing. I'm asked this all the time. Do I think we're on a spinning ball or are we on a flat lump of rock? And my answer is always the same. I don't know. I really don't know. I hope to one day find out for myself, get high up enough or travel, circumnavigate. But I don't know, so I can't answer that question. But my gut is when we're given two choices, two options, that the truth is something we haven't considered. So we'll argue between ourselves. We're on a spinning ball, we're on a flat realm. I think personally, I think that we're on something that may be round. I don't know if it's spinning, but I think it may well be round, or perhaps a ring donut with the entrance to the North Pole and the South Pole being the top and bottom, the whole of the donut itself, and that the landmass is a lot larger than we've been told about. So when you can see you stand at the beach at Dover in Kent, and you can see the beach at Calais in France, you shouldn't be able to do that, allowing for the curvature of the Earth. But you might be able to if we're stood on something 1,000 times bigger than we've been told. So that's where I am. I don't have an answer to what we are stood on right now because I don't have the information. So I just wanted to share that with you because I'm often accused of being, oh, he believes that we're spinning on a ball in space. He believes we're on a flat Earth. I don't believe either. I don't because I just don't bloody know. So I don't think about it that much. But yes, the zombies. Um, there are different types of zombies. There are actually stories across the world of people going to graves and resurrecting bodies that are then actually used as slave labor. And I've written about those in that book. There are stories that have appeared in newspapers over the years of graves being robbed, but people seeing these beings, these people, sort of reanimated and brought back to life. So there's examples of those stories where they appeared, even the names of the publications that they were in. So there are those stories. Some of them relate to actually being able to put people into some kind of almost comatose state where they appear dead and the heartbeat is almost non-existent if not checked thoroughly. It's not almost non-existent, so they're presumed dead, but they're not, and they're brought back, sort of reanimated and brought back, and used for all sorts of nefarious activities. So you've got that element to it, but you've also got this zombie virus as well. So there are lots of different examples of what we could refer to as a zombie, and perhaps one is an NPC, somebody who walks around fully vaccinated, kind of in a almost, I don't know what the expression is, but they're kind of not aware, oblivious perhaps, of what's going on around them, and every day's the same, that they just rinse and repeat. And are they zombies? Is that a direct result of the vaccine, perhaps? And are these people the ones that sit in the middle lane at 60 miles an hour on a motorway now, with no traffic either side, that they're so unaware of what's going on, they've almost become a zombie, easily to easily manipulated and controlled, and won't question anything. So there are kind of two elements. One is the reanimation, which I think actually has something to do with being able to put someone into an almost comatose state, and then they are being, and as I've evidenced, the stories of people being brought back to work on farms and mining and so on years ago in different parts of the world. But you've also got what we're calling now this zombie virus, where we almost have a pandemic of people that just walk around with no clue about what's going on, no interest either, waiting for their next dopamine fix, not taking in any information properly. They're not reading anymore, and they just literally do the same thing every day. So there are kind of different versions of a zombie, if you like, as far as I can see. One that we would define as someone that had been raised from the dead, but weren't actually completely dead. And the second one is someone who is perhaps an NPC to some extent.
It's fascinating, and you mentioned the fact that there's stories and legends or documented testimonies of people who've seen the zombies working on farmlands across Africa,
Mm.
Haiti. And there's a book I have, it's one of my most precious books. It's called Faces in the Smoke, and it's by a man called Duke Ngurzi, which I think he may have passed on or he's definitely retired because I've been trying to track him for years to get him on my channel. So he went exploring. all the different sacred ancient tribes. He went to the Sahara Desert and he lived with the Tuareg people who are the blue
Oh,
men of
wow.
the Sahara, yeah, that dye the cloth because they've got blue eyes. I'm like, where did they come from? They just appeared in the desert, but it probably wasn't all desert. And we forget those things in our 3D minds, the way that we are programmed to listen to what the history books say. And in that book, there's a section on zombies. And like you said, there were people like a man would do a black magic spell on a man he didn't like. That man would die or become zombified. He would be buried. The man would have him dug up and then have him work for him for the rest of his life. And to keep them in a zombified state, they have drugs and they have liquids that keep them like that. It is horrendous to think that humans do these things to each other, but humans do these things to each other. There were other elements of people that had been taken and given frontal lobotomies to
Yes.
zombify them, to silence them, many different ways. And, you give enough, let's say a woman with a brutal male partner who's given so many traumatic beatings mentally, physically, emotionally, sexually, in every kind of way. You can also create that zombified state, the 1,000 mile stare, so there are many elements to zombies. But like I said, when I looked at the website of how cocky the World Economic Forum is, and they were almost mocking the fact that they were trying to create a zombie apocalypse because part of the initial scare, wear your mask, why aren't you wearing your mask? I'm not safe. I'm like, I'll put my mask on in England because that means that some bloke in Australia will be safe because I put my mask on in England. These are some of the theories that the Bampots thought we were going to accept as a reality. We wouldn't think about it. Oh, I've got my mask on. Oh, let me just put it down while I take a quick drink and put it up again. Oh, we can't sit inside the building, but they've put a tented area up, which makes so much difference from the inside of the building. I mean, we put up with that. We
Mm.
put up with that. And they thought we were going to turn into zombies, half of us, and attack and maim and take out the people that weren't quite zombified yet. So there's lots and lots of layers to that. I did want to kind of finish up on, I don't want to finish, by the way. I keep talking to you for hours. It's always a fascinating conversation. To talk to us about, because we need to keep bringing that education, and you do it so beautifully, and it's so important. Then people will start walking around towns, and because of you, they're going to look at things completely differently. Take us through the word founded.
Ah, yeah, that's a good one. No one ever brings this up. Well, founded, for me, founded is found dead. They found a building. And they do seem to some extent, the parasites, the elites, they do seem to be following the sort of karmic law to an extent, where they don't want to lie blatantly. And I think that's why we see so many politicians never give a yes or a no answer. So when it comes to building, rather than put on their built in 1803, for example, they'll put founded or established. So we may see a bank in London or Bristol, wherever you are, that says established 1803. That's stating that the bank was established there. Its business was established there in 1803, not the building itself was established, because you don't establish a building, you construct or build a building. So they'll often use the word founded, which, as I said, is found dead. These are buildings from the previous civilization, and because of this fear of karmic retribution, and they're kind of following the method of revelation, they don't want to, they don't want to actually lie blatantly, so they deceive instead. So they'll put founded. So this building was already there. They've taken it. So I refer to them as cuckoos.
Oh my
These are
God.
cuckoos. They take somebody else's nest, take it as their own, and then look what they do with their children. They send their children off to boarding school or have a nanny and probably a wet nurse. I wouldn't be surprised if people like Piers Mogg, Rees Mogg, sorry, are still actually being wet nursed now. So their children go off and they're raised by other people. They are cuckoos. I think that's the best description. Take over someone's nest, get someone else to raise your young. And that's what they've done. So look for these, look for buildings that were founded. And there's a really interesting article which I referred to in my book, which was a lecture, a sermon almost, that was given by a priest in Iron County in New York, sort of following really the reset, the fall of Tartaria and the mud floods. And he was appealing to people to come to Iron County to take a home or a building or a farm because there are hundreds of them here and you can take one. They're not occupied, they're all empty. So come to Iron County, pick a home, pick a farm, have it for free. The doors are open, there's nobody here. It's just like everywhere else in America.
Hmm.
And I actually wrote the whole sermon in that book. Who said it, what the year that they said it, where they were, exactly what they said, so people can then go online, type it in, and find out for themselves. They can actually they can actually quantify this. So, and that's what I try to do in my books. I don't just come out with something. I say exactly where the information came from, who said it and when. And if I'm referencing something from a book, I'll state the name of the author, the name of the title of the book, and in some cases even the page that reference is from. So people can then go out and substantiate what I'm saying. So rather than me just saying, in my opinion, some bloke in America once said blah blah blah, I actually give all the information. And yeah, that appears to be exactly what took place. I think they got rid of the buildings that they didn't have a purpose for. They took the best ones for themselves, and then their friends took some of them for businesses. So you'll see a lot of the older buildings in places like, if you just pick, say, London, for example, the oldest and most incredible buildings are all government owned, or they'll be owned by an insurance company or a bank, basically them and their friends' businesses. And that's what they did. They kept them for themselves.
Yeah.
And then others were used obviously for orphanages, asylums and prisons, but that's still government use. These
Mhm.
aren't buildings that we're going to live in. And that's what they've done all over the world.
Yeah, it's the same playbook. A couple of areas just to go over and add. The cuckoo. I can't believe you mentioned the cuckoo because it occurred to me that I was hosting a cuckoo for some years. Because what does a cuckoo do? It comes along, it plops itself in the nest, it shits on the nest and everything else in it, all the other little birds in there. It gets rid of them, it ruins their life, it causes the biggest debt, the biggest pain. That's what a cuckoo does. I'm glad I dumped my cuckoo. I saw it before it was too late, and I got my cuckoo, like she's gone now. But that was so interesting when you said cuckoo, because that analogy needs to be applied to other people's actions too, I think.
Mm,
And I think it's just time to like step back for people to like have a look. Like, where does that come from? What is a cuckoo? It's an overgrown bird. Its parents can't take care of it. It needs to be dumped off in something else. And then what's it going to do? It's going to bring maiming, harming, killing, ending,
mm,
debt, starvation. Like yeah, that was a very fitting analogy for me in a situation I had. And then a zombie, again, just one more final. I remember years ago, I met this man, and he was a bit older than me, but I thought he was just so fantastic and fabulous and exciting. And we were in a bar, a beautiful bar, like a real, like this bar was in the 1800s, like a Tartarian bar, a beautiful place, and I loved going there when I did. And I don't drink, so I would have been at the bar talking with him, and I would have driven myself home. And when I drove him. When I drove home, I had his phone number and he was like, "Can't wait to see you. And I want to show you this and I want to do this with you." And it was very exciting. I was kind of, oh, it's an intelligent man. He's actually interested in me and he's handsome and he's available. And that's really nice. I didn't hear from him all week. And I was like, that's a shame. So I go to the bar at the time I said I was going to be there. No, I went to the bar the following Friday at the time I'd met him the Friday before. I thought, I wonder if he's there again. He hasn't, maybe he lost my number. So we were sitting at the bar and I'm like, hi. He was like, hi. I said, how are you? He goes, I'm good. I said, how was your week? I said, did you lose my number? He said, what number? I'm like, the number I gave you last week. He went, do I know you? And I remember thinking to myself, are you kidding me, mate? Have you seen me? I am a quality bird. No, I didn't say that. I thought to myself, wow, was he on drugs when he was talking to me? Was he drunk when he was talking to me? Because all jokes aside, it was an extraordinary exchange. And I remember standing there feeling really upset and really stupid and a bit embarrassed. And I just walked away. And he was in the bar the whole night. I was meeting my girlfriends there. And it was just extraordinary. I remember you reminded me of it when you were discussing the different levels of zombieism, because that was definitely was just so bizarre. And he sat in that chair for most of the night by himself on that. And I wouldn't look at him. I wouldn't engage. I had nothing to do because I felt quite humiliated and stupid. But it was really, really odd. Like, what was that? Was it drugs? Was it booze? I mean, I have absolutely no idea. It's crazy.
That's weird.
Hmm.
That wasn't in London by any chance, was
No, it
it?
was in San Diego,
Oh,
in
okay.
yeah, down by the racetrack and San Diego, down that
Yeah, I know
way.
San Diego. But yeah, I worked out there. I worked out there years and years ago in another life. But you just reminded me of something that really strange that happened to me. Um, I don't know if it's still there. I'm guessing it is. But Oxford Circus used to have a big Top Man and Top Shop on the corner on Oxford
Yes,
Street.
yes.
I was stood outside there on a Saturday about, I don't know, 35 years ago, something like that. And I'm stood outside having a fag while my friend's in there looking for a pair of jeans or whatever. And this girl came up to me and she said exactly what you did. How are you? Have you had a good week? And then why didn't you call me? And I said, I'm really sorry. I've never met you before in my life. And she said, were you in blah 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 last weekend, this bar? And I said, no, I don't know it. And she said, I don't know why you're being like this, but you know, if you weren't interested, you should have said, and you were interested on the night, weren't you? Slapped me round the face.
Oh,
This is a Saturday afternoon on Oxford Street, Oxford
oh,
Circus.
awkward moment.
Yeah, I get this slap round the face, and my friend comes out and he said, I just saw that. What the bloody hell did you do? I said, she told me that I was ignoring her on purpose and that if I didn't want to know her, I shouldn't have, shouldn't have been with her that night.
Oh
And,
my God.
why am I treating her like that? And I was being disrespectful. He said, where was this? I said, well, apparently last weekend we were in a club or a bar in London, blah, blah, blah. And he said, but we weren't. I said, I know. He said, we were in the pub near our flat in Milton Keynes. I said, I know where we were. She came back over with her friend, and her friend looked at me and then looked at her and said, are you sure you've got the right person? And my mate turned around and said, we weren't where you said we were. And he's not lying. And I can vouch for him. And she said, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. You just look exactly the same as him. You're even dressed the same way.
Oh
Your
my
hair's the same.
God.
Everything's identical. And a week after that, I was in Oxford and I saw someone sat on a park bench that looked exactly like me wearing the same clothes. And I was with the same friend and we all froze. I thought, isn't that weird? And just for a second, when you were telling
Oh,
me what happened to you, I thought,
yeah.
what if it was his clone?
Yeah. Oh my
He'd
God.
been
Oh my God.
replaced.
Oh
Someone had
my
replaced him, and
God.
this clone was following the same pattern and routine.
That
And
is
and that,
so.
yeah, yeah, yeah. What if? What
Wow,
if?
wow, wow. Well, this has got nothing to do with anything, but now because you keep peeking stories. So years ago, like I was married in the late 90s, right, early 2000s. I was married to a man. I call him Dobby. We're still friends today because he looks like Dobby from Harry Potter. You know, the little
Oh,
elf with the big ears. Was it Dobby loves Harry Potter? He really does. He really does look like him. Anyway, he's always looked a little bit older because he's bald. He's completely bald, this guy, and very pale. And anyway, so we were in Harrods, you know, the department store Harrods in London. It's a very grand, multi-floored, multi-storied place. It just has such treasures and pianos. I love to play the pianos in there. And they used to have pets, and it was just perfumes and
yes.
so amazing for those that don't know. And anyway, it was Christmas shopping years ago. and I'm like, okay, I'll meet you back here in 20 minutes, like back on the perfume counter. So anyway, so I go off and do my thing, and then I can see him, and he's looking into a glass container, and he's leaning over, and he's looking in it. So I take my usual running jump, and I run and I slap his ass so hard that he bumps his face on the glass, and he turns around, and it's an 80-year-old man. Oh, I feel ashamed.
Oh,
Oh my God. I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. This man's standing there, like looking at me. He's like, what did you do that for? And I said, I'm so sorry. I thought you were my husband.
what did he say to that?
He actually laughed after a bit because
Oh,
I was nearly crying. I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. So sorry.
oh, wow.
So sorry. But I mean, it was very funny to start with because I did think that was Michael, and I was just going to give him a running, like, slap on the ass, which I often did to him. And I was like, the Pink Panther, and is it Keto, hiding behind doors and throwing water or getting a wet towel and giving him a flick. And, because those things are funny, and people should
Yes.
play. People should play with each other. Um, I did write one more quick subject before you go, so we can just really, really mine you for all your information. You mentioned some of the buildings in London, and in your book, this book here, Tessa and the Cabbage Patch Kids, you also cover the fascinating glass palaces, Crystal
Yes.
Palace, Alexander Palace. They're all over the world. Can you please just give a lasting memory to leave on what these great crystal palaces were and are, please?
Yes. So they appear all over the world, as you said, crystal palaces. And they were part of the World's Fairs and expositions that took place. All of them, unfortunately, burnt down, which is incredible, really, if you think the temperature you need to reach to burn steel and melt glass. The Crystal Palace in London is the most interesting one because all the glass was made in Birmingham, and all of these panes of glass were shipped down on canal boats, and they were all assembled in London without a single pane being damaged. I think that that might not be the case. These buildings were already there, and I believe that they were massive greenhouses. If you can sort of picture that,
Oh, yeah.
because I think that that was the purpose of these. But yeah, the Crystal Palaces are fascinating because actually they credit the first Crystal Palace, which was in London, they credit that with the man who invented the greenhouse. This is a famous gardener at the time. He invents a greenhouse. He builds this very small structure, the size of a garden shed, and within a year of that, he builds the Crystal Palace for the British World's Fair.
Drugs,
Yeah,
obviously drugs.
it's just incredible. But so I started digging into it, and I looked at how many panes of glass were required to build London's Crystal Palace. Then I looked at where they were made, and I calculated that they built it in 9 months, which is pretty impressive. It would have taken a year for the panes of glass to be built, to be made for this Crystal Palace. And that would have to take into account that this place in Birmingham, this Glazier's in Birmingham, never shutting, being open 24 hours a day for a year, trebling the staff and not producing glass for any other structure in the world during the same period. The canal boats, they would have needed to have something like one every hour leave Birmingham, arrive in London without a single piece of glass being damaged. That's during transportation, because obviously once it gets off the barge, it's then horse and cart, cobbled streets of London. Then you need about 1,000 glaziers ready at the Crystal Palace to secure them into position. There are no records of any incidents taking place that involved anyone being harmed during the construction of the Crystal Palace. There's no record of any of the people working at the factory in Birmingham. There's no records of where the actual materials came from to make them. No records of the glaziers that were employed, where they came from, and where they stayed during the construction of the Crystal Palace. And then, of course, when people start to wonder how the bloody hell did we make this in 9 months, it burnt to the ground. as did they all. So yeah, so that's an interesting one. You've just got to look at the numbers of panes, which I think was around 250,000, and actually what that entails to produce that, and then install them. So yeah, giant greenhouses used for a completely different purpose.
Absolutely. And it's beautiful to bring that to light. So people again look around the towns and the villages and the ancient buildings, some because they didn't take them all down. They tried
No.
with fires and floods and mud
Mm,
floods and but they failed to take everything down and they thought that they would leave what's left, St. Petersburg, for example,
yes.
and they would take out Dresden in Germany. That was one of the biggest pains to the Tartarian Empire or the Kingdom of Siberia or Hyperborea or whatever else other names that are coming to the fore because we are pulling this information through people like you and other scholars because we demand it and it is time. But only the truth can be allowed, only the truth can filter through. And I feel many people are feeling this now. So, anyway, Guy Anderson, I cannot wait to see you again between now and September on my channel, but also in September, the 10th, the 11th, and the 12th, you will be along with other esteemed scholars and speakers, experiences, contactees, military personnel, survivors of the White House and the Pentagon trafficking and abuses, Max Lowen, who survived the Vatican, all the secrets coming out on one stage in Eastbourne, 10th, 11th, and 12th. We've got David Icke. David Icke. We got Kathy O'Brien, who survived the Pentagon. We got Tony Rodriguez, who was on my channel tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow Tony's in. He's the one that was put through child torture programs that the military funded and allowed to happen. We got Max Lowen from the Vatican. We got JP, who was on my channel last night, who can fly on a flight with the army in America to the moon in 10 minutes. It's all true. Then we've got me, Dani Henderson. We got Billy Carson. Oh, he's so fun. We got Praveen Mohan, who's talking about the technology inside the temples, bringing them to life with AI. We've learned so much more about the ancient Vimyanas, who are the ancient flying carpets, also the witches' brooms to some regard, and also the UFO, the craft. I will not say UAP. You can pee off on that one. They're UFOs or they're not, or they're known and they're identified spacecraft. And then we got the great Guy Anderson, my mate here on the screen. And then we have the great, beautiful Nikki Allen for the angels, for the spiritual, for the angelic. So it is going to be the event of the year. And between now and then, Guy, you and I will play a lot more. Would you like to leave lasting words for the day with our beautiful audience? Tell them where they can get your books, please.
Yes. So my website's the best place. But if they're in the UK, and I don't like using that term, but if they are in the UK, then Amazon, Waterstones, they can get them from Waterstones online. But my website is the best place, which is thetartarianempire.co.uk. And they might find some of the blogs on there interesting as well because they contain information I can't put on my social media platforms without losing my account yet again.
Brilliant, beautiful. Guy Anderson, you are just a living library and you bring so much love and joy with everything. No, take the compliment. You know what I'm like. I'm going to make you take it. I'm going to get you in a headlock and give you a noogie and tell you to take it.
I wouldn't mind that
Take it.
actually. That sounds like
Yeah.
fun.
It's great fun. It's great fun. But you're there and I'm here, so I can't do it today. But I will tell you that you are very much adored and loved and respected and are opening the eyes and minds to just countless people. On Facebook, you are Tesla and the Cabbage Patch Kids. That's the name of your page. Go join it, guys. So much information. And of course, your website I will put underneath. So thank you again, Guy Anderson, my friend. We'll see
Thank
you
you.
soon.
Thank you for having me.
Always, always. And to you guys out there, I know you're going to be just so full of beans and thinking, which book do I pick? And I don't get, he's my friend. His information is so important. I'm not getting a kickback. You know how some people, I do it out of love for you guys and out of love for people like Guy, who's worked so hard and dedicated his life to bringing truth for humanity, because you ain't going to get it off the television and you ain't going to get it off the deletes of the leaders of the asshats who are trying to destroy it and crush it and make those awful buildings, big square ones with no personality. Anyway, I am Dani Henderson. I do send love to you all out there, and I will see you soon. Thank you, Guy.
Thank you.